Yet I still stand before you as the first black governor of Maryland and only the third black governor ever elected in the history of the United States of America. But I stand here not just because Lincoln University is one of the premier institutions of higher education in this country. It's because this school created a way for me. Because you created a way for James Joshua Thomas, my grandfather, who was born in South Carolina, was the child of Jamaican immigrants who were new to the United States. Yeah, Nayardi. But when my grandfather was just a child, when he was just a toddler, he and his parents fled back to Jamaica because they were chased away by the Ku Klux Klan. Because my great-grandfather was a minister, and he was a vocal minister. He was the type of minister that didn't just teach the Word of God, but he expected people who were here on earth to act accordingly as well. And the truth is, we're talking about a time when being black and outspoken was a crime, even if it wasn't on the books. So in the middle of the night, after threats from the Klan, my family fled. And despite the fact that my grandfather was just a boy at the time, he never forgot that moment that one of his first memories was watching this country reject him. Watching this country reject him from something that should have been a point of pride and not a point of prejudice. And many members of my family and many members of my extended family, they vowed to never return to this country, and many members have not, and still live in Jamaica. But James Thomas loved this country too much to let the cruelty of others determine his destination. In fact, I always say, in all of his humility, he would always say, this country will be incomplete without me. So he came back, and the place that first welcomed him in the United States of America was this great institution of higher education called Lincoln University. Where my grandfather came here to Lincoln University, met lifelong friends, and eventually he became the first black minister in the history of the Dutch Reformed Church, following in the steps of his father. And when he became a minister, the same threats that were coming to my great-grandfather started coming to him, but my grandfather stuck. And even though he died at the age of 87, while I was serving overseas in Afghanistan, this is a man who had a deep Jamaican accent his entire life, and maybe was the most patriotic American I've ever met in my entire life. Because my grandfather was able to chart an unusual path to go from being an American exile to an American patriot. And I know that I often ask myself, what would make him come back, despite the fact that those are some of his earliest memories of this country. And my grandfather's journey actually helps to underscore some very complicated feelings that I know that I and many people do have about this country. He taught me that you will find lessons not just about national pride or national spirit, but you will find lessons in his story about what it actually means to be an American. That first, he taught me that patriotism is not and it cannot be a passive activity, because the love of your country will be tested, both in big ways and small. But patriotism is a responsibility of a lifetime. Second, he taught me that patriotism is not a belief that your country is perfect, nor is it an understanding that your country has ever been perfect, because loving your country does not mean lying about its history. that being an American has always come with struggle and sacrifice. And I can tell you, struggling, for someone who's been married for 18 years, struggle and sacrifice is a real thing. But it's worth fighting for. And third, he taught me that skepticism about your country is justified. And you should always keep skepticism as your companion, but it should just never be your captor. Let the hard truths that you've learned about America be guides towards a better future and not grudges that will keep you in the past. And I've tried to live in accordance of his lessons. And just as I stand here as part of my grandfather's legacy, so are all of you. Because the same hope and pride that he had in my journey was the same hope that he had in yours. That you, this class, you are the living custodians of our nation's past, and you are the architects of its present, and the relationship that you will build with this country will help determine the future of what this country hopes for. Because in many ways, our country is just deeply divided right now into these two camps. But it's not left versus right, it's not red versus blue. It's a divide between those who will use patriotism as a club to beat others, and a divide of those who feel ashamed to bear the flag. Between those who think that loving America means hating half of the people in it, and those who allow the cynicism of our nation's history to obscure our aspirations. That we've been told by one group that America is perfect. We've been told by another group that America is irredeemable. It's a binary that leaves no room for people like my grandfather. A man who saw evil, but who still had the courage to claim his piece of the American dream. It's a binary that leaves no room for someone like me. A boy who felt handcuffs on his wrist by the time I was 11 years old because I grew up in a community that was over-policed, but who also now stands in front of you as the chief executive of his state. It's a binary that takes the easy way out. Because it's easy to love a country when you reject the need for self-explanation and self-examination. It's easy to rail against a country when you're unwilling to be a part of its betterment. The hard part is being honest about our flaws and being courageous enough to be the ones who are willing to address it. We need to think beyond these old binaries of moral purity as a real metric that defines this country. That real patriotism is neither waving a victory flag, nor is it waving a white flag. That real patriotism is understanding that every fingerprint is actually going to matter. And I'll close with this about why Lincoln University becomes so important in that conversation right now. Because there's few institutions that embody this more than Lincoln University. I would just remind the people who question whether or not an institution like this can adapt inside this moment, I would remind them that Lincoln University was founded in a moment like this. That this school received its charter in 1854. This school received its charter at a time when our nation's fabric was being tested and it wasn't entirely clear how this nation would end up. That this school received its charter at a time when our country didn't even yet view African Americans as 3/5 of a man, because back then, for most Americans, even that seemed generous. And still, in the middle of so much division and chaos, your founders came together and created something that was needed and enduring. Lincoln University. The story of Lincoln is a story of an abiding love. And I know that Lincoln was built for a moment like this because Lincoln was built in a moment like this. And that's why you're so needed. That's why your graduates are needed. That's why people like Drake Smith is so needed. Where you at, Drake? Drake Smith is a public servant. Drake Smith is a patriot. Drake Smith is a Christian. He is a family man, and he is a Marylander. And I'm very clear, I'm just keeping the seat warm for you, brother. That's all I'm doing. Where Drake helped to organize and lead a 3-day march and successfully demanded the release of millions of dollars of funding for Lincoln University. And now he's on his way to divinity school. I know that Jordan Hall is a patriot. Where you at, Jordan? That Jordan came to Lincoln interested in psychology, but a psychology professor, Dr. Linton Williams, shout out Dr. Williams, convinced him to consider entrepreneurship instead, and he joined the student incubator and eventually became its manager. In the fall, he will join the team at Opaque Institute for Economic Development while studying on a full scholarship. Congratulations, Jordan. I know that Valerie Otutu is a patriot. Valerie, where you at? What's going on, Valerie? Valerie was born in Nigeria, but she came to the United States because she knew this country, like my grandfather said, would be incomplete without you. And today she graduates with a degree in computer science and has accepted a full-time position at one of America's great Fortune 500 companies. Congratulations, Valerie. We are a nation of patriots who serve when the mission is hard and who serve when the destination is uncertain. Because making America great doesn't mean telling people you're not wanted. Making America great doesn't mean saying that you're not needed. Making America great means telling people the ambitions of this country would be incomplete without your help. It is a true legacy of the soldiers and the builders and the preachers and the teachers. It's a legacy of the veterans and the ministers who prayed for our success. It's the legacy of the prosecutors who kept our communities safe, the public defenders who watched over all, the professors who inspired our children. It's the legacy of people who marched and who prayed and who voted and who organized so we can make it to this point. And yes, it is the legacy of a proud Lincoln alum, Reverend Dr. James Joshua Thomas, who was never invited to the Maryland State Capitol, but whose pastoral shawl now proudly sits framed on the walls of his 63rd governor. So class of 2025, today and every day, we give thanks to those who came before us. We give thanks for those who might not have known us or might not have known our names, but they woke up every morning and fought for the hope of us. We give thanks because the future prays that you will work on behalf of the hope of our future, the same way the ancestors were willing to work on behalf of us. So as you take these next steps, all I ask is this: live in such a way that when you hand off this country to the next generation, your descendants will welcome you and they will say that we understood the assignment. And that is the most patriotic thing that you can ever do. So God bless you, congratulations, keep leading, keep growing, and keep making us all proud in everything that you do. God bless you guys, and congratulations 2025.
All right, there you